Good morning and welcome to today's webcast, Reduce Capital Project Risk Through Change Order Evaluation. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Our webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download the group attendance sheet and a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
And as we get started, I wanted to highlight that Baker Tilly and Moss Adams have joined forces to create something greater. One firm with the resources, expertise, and vision to better serve the middle market. To learn how we're unlocking opportunities for businesses, please visit our website via the link in the slide deck and handouts widget. This is more than a merger, it's a multiplier. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's presenters from our construction advisory practice, Charnee, Foston, and Henry Morris. And Charnee, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. So hi, everybody. I am Charnee Foston. Like Emily said, I'm a director within our construction advisory practice. We focus mainly on construction contract compliance by performing construction audits, construction process reviews, contract consultations, and the like to help our clients reduce risk for their capital projects. Personally, my background is one of consulting as well as internal audit for a general contractor. So I have kind of that internal and external knowledge. And I will pass it along to Henry so he can give a little update on himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Henry Morris. I'm a consulting manager here on the construction advisory team at Baker Tilly. Today is actually my 5-year anniversary here. So I've been here for 5 years exactly. Prior to working at Baker Tilly, I worked at a large regional general contractor in the finance department, doing project accounting and helping with internal controls, things like that. All right, so objectives for today's presentation. We're going to highlight some common challenges that occur in the construction change order process. I'm sure a lot of us will already be familiar with some of them. We'll explain the importance of following a well-defined and formalized change order process and what that can look like. After that, we're going to identify what key documentation you're going to want to request to substantiate a change order. And we'll wrap that up with defining some controls and risk mitigation measures and strategies that you can implement right now to help address change order risks at your organization. And after we've kind of covered those learning objectives, we'll bring them all together with a real world case study at the end. All right, I'll pass it over to Emily for our first polling question.
All right, our first question for today. What is the status of construction for your organization? And your options are A, planning, B, ongoing, C, just completed, or D, not sure. So I'll give everyone a few moments to make their selection. And to participate in our polls, please click the button next to the answer you choose and hit submit. I'll give it just another couple seconds here. All right, let's go ahead and see what everyone has to say. Back to you.
All right, so it looks like we have a little bit of everything on here, but mostly ongoing. So that's great. I think this presentation has something for all phases of the process, but I think ongoing, there's quite a few kind of controls that you can take with you today. And whether or not you're having some of these challenges, you can implement them, just kind of proactively get ahead of any of those things that can pop up. All right, so we'll start here with just a kind of a quick overview of construction change orders. I'm sure we're all familiar with the basics, but what are construction change orders? They're a formal document. They're typically going to be between the contractor and the project owner, but they can also be between contractors and subcontractors or tier subcontractors. And they're going to be used to modify an existing contract and formalize that. So typically change orders, the purpose, they're going to be used to alter the scope, budget, or project schedule and timeline. And they're one of probably the most important documents in the construction process. They're going to allow you to make legally binding amendments to the construction contract, kind of essentially with the purpose of clarifying things like scope, maintaining legal protection, ensuring fair compensation for all parties, and determining who's going to be accountable for project changes. And we'll talk a little more about kind of the challenge of determining that accountability later. Another crucial piece of project change orders is that they can actually be used for forecasting things like project progress, for compiling financials, and then as well as looking forwards towards project closeout and setting up what that successful project closeout looks like. A few common challenges that we see. We review quite a few change orders every year. We work with lots of owners, lots of contractors, kind of assisting with that process. And a lot of the issues that do pop up really do boil down to 4 issues. The first being unauthorized work. So unauthorized work occurs when maybe there's something that has to be done in a certain amount of time, repair, things like that, and the contractor proceeds with the change before receiving that formal approval from the owner. While this can be helpful timeline-wise, it can make it difficult to control costs or hold parties accountable after the fact for who's on the hook for what. The second issue we do see is what we describe as incomplete or vague change order requests. So change order requests are submitted and they don't necessarily have the full backup with the submission. So maybe they don't have estimates, rates, they don't have adjustments to the project schedule. And this can create confusion about what that scope is looking like going forward and the pricing of any additional scopes. Third, we see delays in reviewing and approving change orders. So this kind of ties in, this can tie into that first point, the unauthorized work. Oftentimes, things may be submitted and if they don't receive those approvals in time, it can stall a project, it can impact that critical path, and it can push the overall project timeline kind of down the road. Number 4, we see disputes over cost allocation. So this really falls into 2 separate buckets. The first being disagreements over how the change originated. So was it owner directed? Is it a design omission or error? Is it contractor caused, such as a need for maybe non-conforming work or repairs based on damage? And the second bucket being what the appropriate funding source is for that cost allocation. So is it coming out of owner contingency, contractor contingency, and allowance, et cetera? And this is kind of one of those more problematic areas where we can see it where if it's not taken care of early and proactively, it can escalate into costly claims or litigation. Emily, I'll pass it over to you for the next polling question.
Okay, our next question. When you think about change orders on your projects, what challenge is most prevalent? And your options are A, work proceeding without authorization, B, lack of clarity with a scope that is being modified, C, limited visibility into where changes originated and by whom, D, understanding how the project budget or schedule has been impacted, or E, none of the above. And again, we'll give everyone a couple seconds to think on this. And for those of you that would like a copy of today's slide deck, you can download them from the folder that says slide deck and handouts. We will also be sending the slides via email after the webcast. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Back to you.
All right, so let's see. So looks like everyone's kind of dealt with all the issues pretty evenly across the board. And I would say that that's kind of what in our experience. It's typically not one or the other. Typically, these issues kind of come as package deals. So in the next steps here, we'll kind of get into how you can go about mitigating some of these, what documents you request, what controls you can put in place, things like that. And I'll pass it over to you, Charnee.
Awesome. So one of the things that we often discuss with our clients or project owners or generally contractors are pretty good with their knowledge of this is having a change order process. So when we think about change orders on a project, we automatically assume that every job is going to have change orders. I've worked on very few that have had none. And so what's really critical is having strong contract terms and conditions surrounding a change order process. For construction projects, we obviously deal with the construction contract, and we want those provisions to be included within. But also for our clients, we always recommend having kind of an internal policy related to handling of change orders. Hopefully that should mirror what you're seeing as far as timelines, documentation, and the like for your construction contract. But that's always kind of what we say as a best practice so that the two things are aligned. So for change orders on a construction project, identification of the change is always going to be the first step. So whether there's something that's happening in the field, whether something is viewed within the drawings as an issue, maybe there's a collaboration problem, maybe there's an unforeseen condition. So really having, as a general contractor or a subcontractor, having that kind of change log that you're maintaining so that you can understand what the pending changes are and get those incorporated within a change order request, which is the next step of the process. So people call them different things. They could be potential change orders. They could be change order requests. They could be cost events, change events. They all kind of are the same thing in our minds, at least. And so that really is going to be the crux of the documentation that helps to support a change order. And so generally what we're looking at when we look at CORs, they start off pretty basic with, here's the origination of the change, here's the issue, here's the problem that we're solving, identifying what the associated cost, or if there's a rough order of magnitude estimate that goes along with the change request, identifying time impacts for the change, if there are any funding sources is what I like to call them. So if there's like an allowance that you can utilize to offset a change order request, or if it's going to come from contingency, all of those things can be kind of highlighted within the change order request. CORs should also include subcontractor quotes or bids, depending on what the scope of work is. And those should really be, properly itemized, kind of fully substantiated, so that either if you're working with a subcontractor, the general contractor that's receiving that backup can clearly understand the impact of the change, and that can flow up properly to the owner from the GC, so that can be understood as well. The change order evaluation process can look different at different organizations, but we always say it's critical to have the owner review. If it's a change to design or specs, the architect or engineer should also review that thoroughly, in addition to the GC reviewing any supporting documentation with the subs. The next step in the process is generally going to be negotiation. So if a change order is going to be impacting the budget or the timeline or both, Some level of negotiation may be needed just to make sure that the value is there and that the change order itself is properly being incorporated into the job at a price that fits the budget or that fits the timeline for the project. There may be a step kind of in between. So after negotiation, change order requests are oftentimes approved on their own. And so that generally is a process that will take place between contractor and owner. Those change order requests then are packaged into a larger, what we call owner change order, which is basically a series of CORs that make up a change order for the owner. And that really is just to help expedite the process. So individual CORs can be reviewed kind of, we don't like to say like on the fly, but it is faster than doing a traditional change order with an owner that will go through a full review and routing process. So packaging those CORs, those approved CORs into an owner change order, and then sending that owner change order out to the owner for their kind of review and approval. That's the traditional process that we see. There are a lot of caveats to that. There's a lot of different forms of documentation that may exist on a construction project that have to be kind of baked into that process. But generally, this is what we see on projects, and this is what we like to have reflected within the construction contract. So some of those key change order documents, like I said, the PCOs or the CORs themselves, the schedule or time impact analysis, and that's really going to be critical for changes that are significant in scope, changes that are for unforeseen conditions, because that's not a planned part of the project. There typically is some level of schedule impact associated with that. And a time impact analysis is kind of just as it sounds. So you want to understand from the project baseline what scope is actually being impacted at what point for the schedule. And you want to make sure that there is an analysis that's performed to explain how the schedule has been impacted, what coordination impacts there are, and how that's impacting trades, what that's doing to, kind of your 2-week look ahead, your 4-week look ahead, and then ultimately your critical path for your project. Support in the way of drawings, specifications, RFIs, submittals, bulletins, all of those documents can be utilized to help substantiate a COR. It is critical to understand how a change impacts, obviously, the schedule, the budget, but most importantly, the scope. The impacts to the scope are going to be what informs your budget and what informs your schedule. So holistically, all of the documentation for a change needs to be properly coordinated to understand the full impact. If changes are flowing to subcontractors, which they typically are, then they should be providing a fully itemized estimate or bid that helps substantiate their portion of the change. Typically, we like to see on their letterhead or letterheads of their suppliers what their breakdown for labor hours is, what labor rates are, the cost of materials, and a breakdown of what those materials are. If they're adding any other types of costs, like daily per diems or vehicle allowances or anything to that effect, that would need to be included within a breakdown as well, so that all parties have that knowledge and understanding, and that can be properly evaluated as part of the change. And then lastly, making sure that change orders as they go through that kind of negotiation process and that review process, making sure that documentation is kept surrounding what's been agreed to, either formally or informally. You wouldn't believe how often those kind of informal things come up when we're doing a construction audit about, well, this was actually approved, but it's not technically part of the change order, but we have this kind of email that says that the owner or architect approved it. So maintaining that kind of critical and crucial documentation for formal and informal approvals is also going to be very, very important. And so the benefits of a formalized change order process. So kind of like I said, making sure that every modification is properly documented, reviewed, and approved before the work proceeds. That is the critical piece of this. And we'll talk about this a little bit in our case study, because we worked on a project where work was done and then change orders were submitted, which created an obvious headache. So making sure that all of that is maintained, submitted, reviewed prior to the work proceeding is going to be critical. And having kind of that change order process laid out and spelled out within your contract with strict timelines for different aspects of the change order process is also critical. It helps to keep kind of all the parties accountable for their piece of the puzzle, if you will. And so it protects from a dispute and litigation standpoint, but it also kind of helps create that expectation for all parties of what's needed when changes are required. A formalized process also helps just maintain that clear communication by all parties on the job, from owner down to subs and suppliers. There is a level of accountability also that is accounted for as part of the change order process. So making sure that it's clear where changes are stemming from, I think, is really critical. Like Henry said earlier, that is one of the biggest challenges that we do see our clients face, is oftentimes a change order might be submitted, but one party, like an owner, thinks it's the GC's issue, the GC thinks it's an owner issue or owner request. And the changes can kind of sit in limbo until the project reaches the closeout stage. At that point, it can be tough, and a lot of those jobs go towards the litigation and dispute route. So really establishing and having change order forms that lay out all of these different critical components is a really great practice to implement, just to prevent those kind of gaps or misunderstandings later down the road. And like I said, obviously for our purposes, and we love an audit trail, we love documentation, but that's also a great reason to have that kind of clear written communication. Change order processes also help just put some confines and controls around the budget and schedule impacts, requiring that detailed cost support, whether that's an estimate, a quote, pricing from a sub, as well as the support for any time extensions is going to be critical. That's the entire intent of a change order, really, is to understand, how is my scope being impacted? How is my budget being impacted? And what's happening to my timeline. So standardizing that process, standardizing that documentation, it lends itself just to transparency on the job holistically. And then lastly, scope creep, which, if you aren't familiar, that really is excessive change orders or excessive changes in the scope for a project. So depending upon what type of organization you are, you may get feedback from the public if you're a government entity, or you may get feedback from teachers, professors, doctors, nurses, depending on what type of project you're working on. And so managing kind of those incoming requests, those changes, that's really part of what having a formalized change order process can do for you. Projects that we've worked on, we have seen where, changes have been requested at the 23rd hour for a hospital or a health system. And it really does impact the design. It impacts multiple stakeholders, not just the person who's making the change. So having that clear kind of formalized policy or process spelled out in your contract and following that, I think is really critical to making sure that only those authorized changes are implemented. And Henry, do you want to talk about some of the enhancements to controls?
Absolutely. Thanks, Charnee. So we've talked a lot about kind of challenges that come up in the process today, kind of issues to watch for. So now we kind of want to talk about 6 control-related enhancements that you can make right now that will actually help mitigate some of these risks and hopefully actually just streamline your process in general to make it easier for all parties. First control, we've kind of covered this. We've mentioned this one a few times so far, but establishing a really clear written change order policy. So I know earlier we did the poll kind of just seeing where everyone's at in their organization with construction projects. We saw some people are just starting out, they're planning, some have them ongoing, some people are wrapping up. The nice thing about this one is you can implement this at any time. Ideally, the best time, of course, is in the contracting phase, getting it in the contract, setting those requirements up. But there's no better time than today if you don't have this in place. So what a written change order policy should look like, you want to go through, define the roles, responsibilities, and what required documentation should be in each submission. You also want to mandate that no additional work is going to proceed without that fully executed change order in place. This is going to kind of help give everyone the opportunity to go through, review the documents, get everyone on the same page for things like costs, schedule extensions, funding sources, things like that. So that way, after the money's already spent, we aren't going back trying to figure out what's approved, what needs to be divvied up, who's on the hook for what. We just want to get out ahead of it and make sure that that process and that path is fully defined. Number 2, this kind of ties in with that written change order policy, but you want to make sure you use standardized forms and templates. So something that we see is that sometimes we'll be going through reviewing change orders, and the backup that comes along with it is different for every COR, every PCO, every change order. But you want to ensure that the forms and templates being used are completely standardized. That way, when you have that in hand, you're ready to review, you know exactly where to find everything, and there's no real gray area. Having those forms and templates standardized, it's going to help ensure that there's consistency when it comes to documenting those change requests and estimate breakdowns, and also help with the approval process. There's going to be less ambiguity because everything is kind of right out there for you, and you know where to find it. Number 3 is implementing a centralized tracking system for all those change requests and change orders. Nice thing about this one is there's never been a time where this is easier. There's a lot of great software solutions, digital platforms that are out there that are capable of logging all kind of current project CORs and change orders, monitoring their statuses, and flagging which ones are overdue for approvals. Many project management systems that I'm sure your teams are already using have these capabilities, which is awesome. And it can really kind of help ensure that everything's moving forward through the pipeline, nothing's stalling out and getting stuck, and that anywhere where there's that additional need for information, that request is documented and it's out there so that we can kind of keep the process moving forward. Number 4, you're going to want to require detailed scopes and cost justifications. So this has kind of been the overall theme of a lot of the challenges that we've mentioned so far, I would say. When we're doing that change order request process, we want to ensure that contractors are providing very comprehensive descriptions of what the need for the change is, what the scope of the change is. And with that, we want the itemized pricing for the different items or for the different cost items, and as well as the breakdown of things like markups, labor rates, hours used, all the drawings and material specifications, things like that. And that's going to give the owner the opportunity to really do a thorough change order evaluation because all that information is right there in one place for them. When it comes to the submission, we want to make sure that we've kind of set strict timelines and expectations for the submission, review, and approval. So this is for parties on both sides of the fence here. On the contractor side, we want them to ensure that they're submitting those documents as soon as possible and prior to performing the work when possible. So if it's not, emergency situation, things like that, we want all of that documentation submitted ahead of time so we can all agree on what the scope looks like, what any kind of extensions to the schedule are going to look like, and what any additional costs are going to be. On the owner side, though, we also want to make sure that we've established deadlines for responding to change requests. So ensuring that we're reviewing any kind of change order requests in a timely manner. We're responding to any of the contractor's questions about the scope, things like that. That way, there's no delays. We're not holding up any of the critical path for the project, and we're able to keep things moving forward and fair for all parties. Additionally, we want to conduct regular change order review meetings. So one major problem with change orders is that they can kind of get stuck in that limbo area. The request gets sent out. Maybe we need more information. Maybe we need more documentation. Maybe someone doesn't understand part of the scope, and so it'll just sit in the inbox. If you get a regularly scheduled change order review meeting on the calendar, it's a good reason to bring everyone together, talk through any current outstanding requests, any potential upcoming requests, and resolve those issues early. And a kind of added benefit of this is it's going to foster that collaboration between the project team. It's going to get everyone talking about it and working towards kind of what the next anticipated changes or issues might be. I'll pass it to Emily for our next polling question.
All right. Thanks, Henry. Our next polling question: have you ever had an independent change order assessment performed? And your options are A, yes, regularly; B, yes, on an as-needed basis; C, no, but would consider; D, no, and do not see the benefit; or E, I'm not sure. And we'll give everyone a few moments to think on this. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Back over to you.
Great, thanks, Emily. So it looks like this one kind of a little bit all over. We kind of got it spread pretty evenly. Most know what was considered. Great. So we're actually going to talk to you a little more right now, kind of about what that kind of third-party change order review process can look like. So I will pass it over to Charnee.
Thanks, Henry. So kudos to those of you who have had that kind of independent assessment performed. We certainly recommend them for the majority of construction projects, but depending upon the type of contract that you have, the type of change orders that you allow, whether they're kind of T&M based, cost plus, lump sum, there can be different kind of benefits to having that third-party review performed. So when we talk about a third-party assessment, we're really thinking about change orders that are submitted by contractors to owners. And we like to perform that kind of throughout the life cycle of the project. I think, obviously, it helps to mitigate risk. So reviewing change orders as they're submitted helps to clarify what documentation is going to be needed. It helps to clarify and hold accountable each party to what the contract requires as far as documentation. If there are specifications for like overhead and profit markups, if there are rates established for bond, insurance, labor, equipment, having a third party that can take a look at those, as well as take a look at the third party support that you're getting from subcontractors or suppliers to help kind of do that validation and reasonableness of cost and scope, I think is really, really helpful and beneficial. So obviously the risk mitigation piece is there. As far as project management goes, it's really helpful so that project teams can do what they do. So we probably do, I would probably say at least 50 to 75 change order review type engagements on an annual basis. And one of the things that we hear often from people is, we're reviewing the change orders as an owner, or we're reviewing them as a GC for what we know and what our kind of expertise is. So for a GC, that's typically going to be scope, and that's going to be impacts to schedule, impacts on coordination of activities and things like that. An owner is typically more so focused on making sure that the project gets completed as they want it to be, and that the final product is what they need. And a third party kind of assessor that comes in is really looking at, are the change orders themselves contractual? Is the change itself part of base scope, or is it a true change order? Is the time impact analysis reasonable? Does it make sense? Is it adequately supported? And so I think when all the parties kind of work together, it really allows for the project team to focus more on the project related activities, as opposed to having to do some of that kind of back and forth review and negotiation kind of on their own. And then, kind of like I said, I already covered the third point, verifying that the change orders comply with the terms of the agreement. And where we do see this being really critical, if we're doing change order assessments throughout the life of a project, it helps us when we get to the end and the closeout phase. We find oftentimes that things are pushed. We can assess that at closeout. We'll take a look at that at closeout, and then closeout comes and everybody is gone with the wind. They don't want to participate in that. They've moved on to other projects, and everybody just wants this wrapped up because, it's been going on for 2 years. It's probably, there's been an overage to the budget or the timeline or something like that. So by having those kind of reviews done independently as the project is ongoing, you get to the end and you have a smoother transition. Job cost reconciliation can be performed, and everybody can kind of move forward to the closeout and fewer disputes and litigation and things like that. So for the case study, I know, Henry, we have a few questions. So if we can get through this in maybe 2 or 3 minutes, that'd be great.
Absolutely. No, I was thinking the same thing. So I'll just take everyone through this really quickly. So kind of a quick case study based on our experience. So set the context, $130 million casino hotel was under construction, and it's both behind schedule and over budget. Contractor came forward with some change orders for work that they wanted to submit, but they were fairly unclear. The work had already been performed, and they were submitted to the client 6 to 24 months after the issues were uncovered. And why that matters is that this specific contract actually said the owner had to be notified within no later than 30 days of the issue, and the need for the change became apparent. So the owner had some concerns here. The main three, the change order requests, they were submitted for costs that were incurred, and they were well outside of that 30-day window. The second concern, they included excessive general conditions that they were adding to the total contract value, and these were not tied to a schedule extension or anything like that. And then the nature of the costs were unclear, and there were disagreements over who was responsible for a lot of them. There was a lot of kind of lump sum amounts. The purposes, the scopes weren't spelled out, and sometimes the nature of why the cost was incurred didn't always appear to be necessary or the responsibility of the owner. So the solution to kind of these challenges and concerns, one was performing a very in-depth review of the project change orders and all the included backup, and two, improve the tracking of the change order requests and really kind of build up the change order logs. They had some additional detail and tracked and showed kind of that path of the approvals and what was in whose court at that time. So there were the results of this. Based on the in-depth review of the project change orders, we were able to identify more than $288,000 of unallowable change order costs. and these were results of repairs and corrections of non-conforming work. There was also $600,000 of subcontractor billings that were not part of an approved change request, and that came out as part of the reconciliation. In addition, though, they implemented some controls to help prevent excessive and non-allowable costs from being included in any future change order requests. They noted there was increased transparency into costs included in project change order requests, which party was responsible for them going forward. And the overall result was there was greatly enhanced communication between all parties, and just a better peace of mind for the project team because everyone understood what was included in those requests and kind of what the status was and who was responsible for what. I'll pass to Charnee for some key takeaways here.
Sorry, couldn't find my unmute button. So as far as successful construction projects, they always begin with well-defined contracts. We do a lot of these webcasts, and that's something that we always harp on because it is really kind of critical and crucial to the success of any job. Challenges with the change order process can be mitigated with detailed documentation, having a clear process or policy, and then just regular communication, whether that's kind of an OAC meeting or meeting specifically designed to address change orders. Third-party reviews can help strengthen controls, improve cost recovery or cost prevention, and then really just streamlining the change order process provides that transparency to all the stakeholders that are involved in a project. A couple of questions. So we have a question here about pricing being submitted, but it takes time for that to be approved. Sometimes the work is kind of performed in good faith, and then you get to the end of a project and the change orders are still scrutinized. So I do hear that pretty often from contractors. I do suggest that the CORs be approved before the work begins. And I think having a construction contract that specifies a time frame for owner review, sometimes we do see that. It'll say, within 7 to 10 days. If there's no objection within that time frame, it's considered approved. Having language like that being incorporated, whether that's an owner edition or a contractor edition, I think is great. It depends on the change, of course, but we like to see the CORs being approved before the work in case there is at a later point a dispute related to what work was performed, who was responsible, and the like. Just a few comments. I agree the architect should review changes to ensure that the estimate is reasonable, and if there are any schedule impacts, that's critical as well. How do you confirm that the scope of a change is not already included in the base work? So that really is going to come down to having a good understanding of what the base scope is, as well as the detailed content of the change order request. So understanding kind of the description of what the work is, what the original contract scope was, being able to tie that back to the original estimate or the existing contract budget. And then honestly, just not making any assumptions about whether something should just be a change because it was submitted as a change. Understanding the original contract documents, having that supporting backup for the change, and making sure that it's spelled out what the added work is, what the deleted work is, or if there's kind of any ambiguity, making sure that that is also defined as part of that process. And then I think we're just about out of time. So we do have a couple of more questions, which we will get a response to each of you for. I am going to turn it back over to Emily to close us out.
All right. Thank you, Charnee and Henry, for a great presentation today. As Charnee said, we did have a lot of questions come in, and if we didn't have time to answer your question, we'll do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. And here is a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey, as your feedback is very important to us. Please also visit mossadams.com for future webcasts and other resources to help elevate your performance. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next time.